Can you hear us all? Do a quick check.
Yep.
Everyone can hear.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, welcome back, Devils fans. It is your host Ace here on Running with the Devils, where we are talking New Jersey Devils hockey all year long. Please hit that subscribe button, smash the like, share with a friend. Thank you very much. And over the past few months, some of you have inferred, oh, there's all these there's Devils people everywhere. You guys should do something. Long overdue. I've been meaning to get something on the books, and here I am with some special guests today. We have one that will be joining us at some point in the next couple minutes here for what I will call a little roundtable New Jersey Devils hockey talk. And my guest today, Trey Matthews, Daniel Amoia. Quickly, Trey, start with you. Where can everyone find you? Because I don't want to forget that. So you guys all have a million things. So go ahead.
Yeah, you can find my show, Locked On Devils, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from, free and available. And you can also read some of my articles over at Pucks and Pitchforks, which is fan-sided. And here we go. We got Sam Wu joining us now.
Go ahead, Daniel. Give them all your many conglomerates.
You could find me on Twitter, Daniel_Amoia. That's AMOIA. I write for the Hockey Writers, so my link to my articles will be in my bio there. And I also run devils.report on Instagram.
Sam, it's on you, my friend. Where can they find you?
Hey, everybody. Co-host of the Let's Go Devils podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Let's Go Devils Pod.
Okay, awesome, fellas. So I'm going to kind of go in a little bit of a chronological order here. So I'm just going to start off with the most recent kind of hot button issue for a lot of people. I guess we'll just start with Trey and then go Daniel, Sam. I guess that's clockwise. Thoughts on deadline day for your New Jersey Devils?
I mean, for me, it was pretty much to be expected because I spoke about it on my show, which is Fitzy doesn't really have much to work with. I'll play devil's advocate here. What was he going to give up in order to get like a big name player? Because they didn't own a first round draft pick. You don't want to trade away Shimo Nemitz or Seamus Casey for a few month rental. That doesn't make any sense. You can't sacrifice your future for a rental, especially when you're not contenders. And the Devils had too many players that have like no trade clauses in their contracts. A big example would be Eric Haula. He has a full-blown no trade clause this season. And if you were to include like Curtis Lazar, Tomas Tatar in a package deal, what are you going to get? Nothing. So respectfully, what did everyone expect?
Daniel?
So, I mean, the thing is, like, realistically with Jackhughes, I think most people could agree that the Devils probably weren't making a deep run. I mean, even with Jack in the lineup, they're playing sub 500 hockey in the calendar year. So it was a tough call, and I think we kind of mentioned this briefly. The thing that made the fan base so frustrated was because all the national reporters were saying the Devils are adding, the Devils are making a big push. They want a top 6 forward, etc. And the bottom line is they didn't get that. And I think fans, even without Jack, I mean, this is a fan base that hasn't seen a ton of playoff hockey recently. And that's something that's still important to them. So with Fitzgerald not bringing one in, regardless of circumstance, I think there's reasonable cause for the fan base to be frustrated. I mean, Fitzgerald said himself he came in second for a big asset. I don't think it's been confirmed who that was, but if you're not first, you're last, and that's what we saw there. It's unfortunate for him, but I mean, he himself said there was some disappointment in his deadline, so I don't think it's completely unfair to go and somewhat bash it when he himself said that. So I get the fan base's frustration. I think in the long haul, it's not going to make too much of a difference, but there were some names out there who could have been beyond rentals, and actually the player that he came in second place for had term that was confirmed still on his deal. So that's someone who could have potentially helped the Devils in the future, and now he's not a Devil. So that slightly thins out the options for the offseason, and plus throws kind of a roadblock in the plans for the rest of this season, because I'm sure we'll get to this later, but there's still value in making the playoffs. Like, if the Devils don't make the playoffs, that's a pretty bad look for an organization that I think was second in the NHL at Christmas.
I think fair point. So you personally, though, you did, given everything that we know and all the reports that are coming out, you did expect something a little more substantial to occur than what actually did occur.
Yeah, certainly. And I think Fitzgerald himself expressed that, and he came in second place. But I mean, there were times earlier where he could have made a move. Look how early the Rantanen was available. Not saying that that's who his target should have been, or when Capo got dealt. Like, you don't have to be handcuffed to the deadline. And the depth scoring issue, or the goal scoring issue in general with the Devils, was prevalent from really like December 1st. I wrote about it in late December when the Devils were still in great standings position. And I mean, if you just looked at the numbers, they were getting nothing aside from the top guys, and that wasn't sustainable.
No, all great points. And I think, a lot of other fans as well were kind of clamoring for something to happen much sooner, because I do think the, offensive, especially decline of the team as the team started to kind of tank after that holiday break. Everyone was like, what the hell's going on with the goal scoring? And I do think that is a fair point. You had 2+ months, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, between Christmas and the deadline to kind of figure something out. And we just kind of all watched it. I call it the slow bleed out. And I think that's, the source of a lot of people's frustrations with it all as well. What are your thoughts on the amazing deadline day there, Sam?
Well, I think I could side with the fans, because the fans want to win now. I mean, it's been 12 long years since Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment has purchased the team from Jeff Vanderbeek, and the frustration is growing. And there were a couple teases along the way. You had the Taylor Hall Hart Trophy winning season where they made the playoffs, where it gave you a kind of glimpse, a taste of what it could be in the future. And then you had that very successful season where they broke the points record for the regular season out of nowhere, and you saw the future. You beat the Rangers in the first round, and you got a really good taste of what this team could be. And do I fault Fitzy for not making the moves that fans wanted? No, because I just think that you don't want to really force it on trade deadline. If it's not there, it's not there. You don't want to mortgage your future, especially with Jack being out for the rest of the season. I think he was very strategic. I do believe he was in a lot of these, in the running for a lot of these deals. At the very least, he drove up the price. And I think that's very important, because your competition is going after a certain player. If you're going to go after that certain player as well, you might as well drive up the price if you're going to lose out on that player.
I'm clearly the most negative kind of about this whole situation, just because the fans want playoffs, right? And even for newer fans, a lot of fans became fans, during the 2012 Cup run, or that record-setting season where they had 112 points and beat the Rangers in 7 games. A lot of people, including myself, maybe I was fooled, but it seemed like that was really going to be like the new turnaround. Like, okay, we now have our core pieces in place. This is going to be a perennial playoff team. We'll kind of tinker on a season-by-season basis, and the playoffs is now going to be a regular thing. To be very inactive last year, where the Devils drowned with horrific goaltending all year, I thought that was a huge misstep. I think a lot of people agreed. Like, if we had gotten a goalie at some point earlier than deadline day, where we got 2 of them, playoffs could have been salvaged. And so now you're looking at this season coming off of that. Everyone's like, okay, I think at least Fitz had a great offseason. I'll give him that. High expectations for a lot of people for the team coming into this year. But then to hit that wall at, right after the holiday break, and we all kind of saw the same thing. Daniel said he put articles out about it, and it wasn't I don't think a secret to anyone that as the team's offense kind of dried up and we became a very top heavy team, that clearly, maybe we do need a legit top 6 winger. Maybe the bottom 6 does need some revamping, but either way, the cushion just kept getting smaller and smaller. And if the plan was to wait till deadline day the whole time, then you certainly, in my book, can't cite market conditions and prices being asked as an excuse to not execute on that plan. And I just think for myself, completely underwhelming. I was devastated. And again, with all the reports leading up to it that they're going to be actively buying and all this stuff, it just kind of fans the flames. And then the cherry on the sundae, if you will, was to go out there in the press conference after the disappointing day and then openly admit that you came in second. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that before. I mean, what kind of, are we supposed to feel bad for you? You had a job to do. You didn't do it. I think tons of fans will defend, whatever they do or don't do. I certainly will not be one of them, and I will voice my displeasure. And I thought it was honestly, quite frankly, a tragic day. And just the last thing, Trey, to your point, where you said you didn't have the assets. When you just look around, you don't want to use picks. I mean, we used a second rounder to bring in Dumoulin. So you're going to tell me we couldn't use a second rounder to bring in Zetterlund? I mean, he was essentially obtained for a second rounder and a low level prospect. And even if he was a rental, at least do something to try to help this team get in the playoffs. Like, as Daniel said, there is a value to that, I think, to the fans, especially to the players there. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the players in the locker room were like, that was the boost you're giving us. I do think it was a little bit of a slap in the face to guys like Nico, jesperbratt, and especially the vets. Brendan Dillon, Markstrom, you sold them a bill of goods to come here in free agency. You did get them here, but they expected to play for a team that was indeed trying to win. And unfortunately, if you're those guys, I think when you see that deadline, you start to question, is this franchise really trying to win now? Markstrom signed for one more year, and he's given us great play. So I don't know. I certainly am, devastated about it. I know a lot of the other fans are, but I definitely think there was pieces to at least do something more than they did.
And I do agree with you, Ace. And to go off your point, I said it on my show, which is the most valuable asset that the Devils have going into the trade deadline is their 3 second-round picks. And I didn't even know Fabian Zetterlund was available, quite honestly.
Yeah, Fitz didn't either.
We were talking about it over at Pucks and Pitchforks, which is, wait a minute, he was available, and you could have used one of your second-round draft picks to get him back. Now, his stats could be inflated just because he's playing with the San Jose Sharks. We don't really know, but we'll wait and see. But yeah, I mean, the 3 second-round picks, I was expecting Fitzy to do a little bit more, and some names that came to mind for me were reuniting with Kyle Palmieri, Ryan Donato, Jake Evans. Evans ended up signing an extension with Montreal, so he was off the books. For Kyle Palmieri, I was open to reuniting with him, but the person in charge, Lou Lamoriello, I don't think he's going to deal Palmieri to the Devils. Let's be honest. He runs things with an iron fist. And Donato, he was hot on the market, but obviously that didn't come into fruition. So I was looking at just some rentals with the second-round picks because, like I said, Devils didn't have a first-round pick. So I'm just like, they got to do something, but they didn't do it with the players I listed.
Anybody else have anything on all of this?
I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit because I know there were a lot of people unhappy with what the Devils gave up for Brian Dumoulin, but I've talked to a lot of people. The consensus I've gotten is a second-round pick in this upcoming draft was viewed the same as a 4th to 5th round pick by most teams because that's how weak of a draft it is. So I do think there's some, I don't know the word to describe it, but I guess stock in that. And you saw how these picks were flying. So that's why it almost kind of surprised me when a guy like Zetterlund goes for a second.
I was going to say, to that point, then that makes it even more ridiculous that we didn't try to get Zetterlund. If these picks are worthless, you get them to get us into the playoffs at least. I mean, that has to equate to some revenue for the owners.
But hang on. What if maybe Fitzy did ask the Sharks and they said, no, we already gave you timomeier a few years ago. Hang up the phone.
I don't think that would ever happen, but I do think if you bring a guy like that back, and again, this could be crazy, conjecture, but does that make Fitz look like he has some egg on his face or regrets in any way the Timo trade? I don't know. It could be totally unrelated. Yeah. Is it like doing an about face? But either way, if the second-round picks are just getting thrown out there like disposable garbage, to me, even more of a point why you should have tried to get Zetterlund, but, it didn't play out that way.
But like I said, it's just this is just a hand that's being dealt to the Devils. Now, I think come the offseason, they're going to do something because during trade deadline day, they re-signed Jonathan Kovacevic to a 5-year extension. So what that tells me is that either Shimon Nemitz or Seamus Casey will be out of here come summertime. So I think that's what Fitzy's preparing for. So he was like, okay, look, the trade market is drying up right now. We're not going to be able to do anything this time around. What I can do is re-sign Jonathan Kovacevic, so that way I have another defenseman locked up long-term, and then maybe test the market with Shimo Nemitz and Seamus Casey. I've said it before. I am open to trading one of them away. However, it has to be for the right asset. Cannot be for a rental player. Do not jeopardize your future and your youth for a rental player. Otherwise, you're going to look like a complete idiot if you like buy this rental player and you don't win the championship.
So I guess I'm going to use that what you kind of said there. I'm going to skip around on my little list here, I guess, and then we'll start with Daniel on this one. Prediction for what you think the blue line looks like next year, given the everything that Trey kind of touched on and what we know and who's been signed and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the right side's basically locked up. Like it's Pesce, Kovacevic, and Hamilton on the right side, and it's going to be that way for a while unless they somehow move Hamilton in the offseason. But I don't see that happening personally. I agree. I think at least one of Nemitz or Casey are going to have to go in this offseason. It would not surprise me if it was Nemitz, just based on how everything has gone. And then the left side, Siegenthaler's locked up, Dylan's locked up, and Luke Hughes will be locked up. So I really don't think it's looking any different. It's going to be interesting to see where Santeri Hitaka falls into that category, because he was a Devils leader in plus minus last season. Not that that's really saying much, but he was just decimated by injuries, and now he's been in Utica, and I guess there's not really a quote unquote need for him. But I think he's someone who's still very underrated and was very solid in his time. It's just it's gonna be very interesting to see how this offseason goes, because I will give Fitzgerald credit for, like, last offseason, it was the goaltending needs to be fixed. The goaltending needs to be fixed. And he went ahead and did that. And the Devils' goaltending has been tremendous. And I think that same emphasis needs to be put on really even more than one forward, because even if you bring in another very good top six piece, I mean, the bottom six needs to be shaken up too. And you have a lot of guys coming off the books. I know Lazar is. I'm blanking, but I know a few guys are coming off the books. So they need to figure out that depth scoring as well. Maybe in a perfect world, Daniel Sprong is someone who could end up being like a third, fourth line role, giving him those limited minutes and giving him those scoring opportunities. It worked to perfection against Philly, but obviously not going to jump to conclusions after one game. But it's going to be interesting with their cap space as well. They're going to have to do some maneuvering. It helps that the cap's going up, but they're going to have the Luke Hughes extension. With Hamilton and Palat on the books, there's not a ton of wiggle room there, and then they're going to have to extend Luke as well, which is obviously going to be a hefty price. So, yeah, it's just going to be very interesting. That this is, I would argue, by far the most important offseason of Fitzgerald's tenure, but I think the narrative, if the Devils make the playoffs and can at least hold their own, is going to make the fan base feel a lot better about the whole situation, versus if they miss or if they barely squeak in and then just get like swept. The playoffs are still so important for the overall vibe and what people are going to be thinking about the future of the team.
To one of your points, I thought we would see Hitaka for sure. Like, with all these injuries, I thought for sure we were going to see him. To go out and get Dumoulin, it seems like he's almost like a non-factor in the organization. Is that like a fair, like, you, again, to use the assets on Dumoulin, he's not going to be here next year. So you wasted a second round pick, even if it is kind of disregarded as a weak draft and whatever else. But, no faith in a guy we already had in the organization that's played some games and looked pretty decent when he did play.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I tweeted right after it happened that I think Dumoulin is an upgrade over Hitaka, but a marginal one. And I think that would be a better move if Fitzgerald went ahead and made another move and they were a little more serious. But it's a little more questionable when he didn't get anyone else. And the outlook is still relatively bleak. I mean, obviously anything could happen. but just the roster on paper isn't really even remotely comparable to those top contending teams like, say, Winnipeg or Washington. So, I mean, for all we know, maybe he made the move for Dumoulin fully intending to bring in that piece, but bottom line is that piece never got added in. So that's just the reality of it right now. And like I said, I mean, Fitzgerald himself wasn't happy with the deadline. And you mentioned how you think it's a slap in the face to the players. During his press conference, I asked him, do you think there's some disappointment by your players, given that you weren't able to land that big asset? And he said that he thinks they always want, it was something along the lines of we always are welcoming to new faces, but I don't think there's any disappointment when we don't bring them in. And I mean, like, to be fair, what's he going to say? Like, yeah, I let my whole team down. Like, but I think it was Don Sweeney in Boston said something along those lines when they dealt Marchand. He said, if I did my job correctly, we wouldn't be in this position. So I think Fitzgerald took more of like the roundabout way of covering himself, whereas there are other GMs in the league who will be straight up about it. And I don't think that's how Fitzgerald is.
And so you do think we will see Dougie and Siegenthaler both return? You don't think either one will get moved?
I mean, I don't see a world where Siegenthaler would ever get moved. I mean, aside from last season, he's been an excellent defensive defenseman. Hamilton, on the other hand, it wouldn't surprise me, but obviously only in the right situation. Like, you're not just dumping him for the sake of dumping him, because even Hamilton, even though his offense has taken a little bit of a downtrend, I mean, the Devils don't really have anyone like him in terms of their offensive skill set. I mean, Luke Hughes should surpass that one day, but he's not there yet, and I'm confident he will surpass that one day. But that's going to take time, so I wouldn't bank on that.
Yeah, I think Luke's going to be a beast. Go ahead, Trey.
I just want to add this, then I'll let Sam speak. Players with a no movement clause: Timomeier, Jesperbratt, Andre Palat, Dougie Hamilton, and Jacob Markstrom. Players with a no trade clause: Eric Holla, Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon. Modified no trade clause: nicohischier, Jonas Siegenthaler, Stefan Nason, and Jake Allen.
Oh, so Hall's not going anywhere, Daniel. It's good for you guys to be BFFs for a while.
Well, wait. It'll turn into a modified no trade clause next season, so we'll see what happens. But I want to give Sam a chance to speak. He hasn't spoken in a minute.
Oh, thanks, Trey. I have mixed feelings about all this. I like the stability. For many years, it was just a revolving door of players throughout the Devils organization during their rebuild. Right here, I think you've got character players, stability, guys that are in their primes on defense. I would say Siegenthaler is at a reasonable price. Dougie came with a premium at the time that he signed as a free agent. Pesce, I think, was a good deal. And Kovacevic, maybe a little too much, but just keep in mind one thing I just thought of. When you think of Nemec and you think of Casey, I mean, the Devils put great value in right-handed mobile defensemen, especially in the draft. These are assets that could help the team, or in a blockbuster trade could happen maybe down the line. I think Fitzy kept his assets this time around. I don't think he forced it. I just don't think the situation, what's going on with the Devils right now, I'd like to see this team moving forward. And I got made fun of by Chico about it, but I think this team has still some more time to grow. And if they're going to grow without jackhughes and see how they do down the stretch, if they make the playoffs and how far they can go, I think they'll be a stronger team because of it. I mean, there's a lot of things that they've improved on this season. Their defense, their goaltending. I would like to see more emotion out of the team like they did in the first, third of the season, where if you get near Markstrom or Allen, there will be a scrum and there will be a price to pay, and it's all territorial. I love that type of hockey, and I think when it comes to the playoffs, you look at the Florida Panthers, how they beefed up. I mean, you want to talk about territorial. Once Tkachuk comes back, if he does from injury, with Marchand and Sam Bennett, I mean, they are going to be very territorial in the offensive zone and in the defensive zone, and that's how playoff hockey is played. And you start each season to wanting to win the Stanley Cup, and I think the Devils are just taking steps there. It's been a slow process. It seems like a never-ending process.
Sam. So you're killing me right now,
it's
Sam.
molasses.
I'm dying slow death in my chair. The growing, Sam, with the growing, that was Lindy Ruff was supposed to be the growing. Like it's time to shit or get off the pot, in my opinion. Like I've tried to be patient. I've tried not to be a crazy fan, but like in the end, this is the 8th year for nicohischier and jesperbratt. Like Nico's an unrestricted free agent in 2 years. If I'm him, I'm jetting out of here so fast, and I don't think it's that crazy. People think everyone's destined to be a lifelong Devil. The guy's won one single playoff series in 8 years. Plus, whatever happens this year if they get in and win a round. But one playoff round, this franchise used to be a proud winning franchise amongst the elite in the league, and it's just like year after year of the same for me with the growing, and they're taking steps. Like step time is over. It's the training wheels got to come off. They already had the franchise record-setting season. They did make it to the playoffs, and then it's regression.
Ace, I agree with you because here are some past champions on this Devils team. Andre Palat with the Tampa Bay Lightning, Paul Cotter with the Vegas Golden Knights, Curtis McDermott with the Colorado Avalanche, Jake Allen with the St. Louis Blues, players with playoff experience, both Hughes brothers, Bratt, Hischier, Hamilton, Meier, Haula, Dillon, Nason, Tatar, Pesci, Markstrom, Mercer, and a few others. I couldn't name them all in that single tweet, but there's a lot of players with experience. And Ace, I do agree with you, which is like, we can't be having this narrative that the Devils are young and they'll learn a little bit more.
It's the future's bright narrative. The future,
right. Nico and Jesper almost have 10 years of experience in the NHL. Jack has a decent amount of experience. So they are young theoretically in age. Like they're all in their 20s. But in terms of NHL experience, no, we can't be calling them young pups anymore, in the words of Stefan Nason. They're veterans now. They're NHL veterans.
What do you got, Daniel?
Well, I've just been thinking about all this, and we talk about how the scoring has dwindled. I've been back and forth on this. I want your guys' thoughts. Do you think that Fitzgerald went maybe a little too hard in terms of prioritizing physicality? I mean, even if you look at his draft, he basically only drafted guys that were like 6'2" and over. Like he really took that whole "the Devils are soft" thing to heart. And I think two years ago, franchise winning a season, that team was built on speed. If you look at the Devils team last year, I think they were in the 94th percentile in league speed, one of the fastest teams in the league. Now they're a below average team in terms of average skating speed. And I've been back and forth on it because it's not like I could pinpoint one specific move he made that was like bad, but I do think letting some guys like even like a Jesper Boquist go, who was good for 11, 12 goals a season, one of the faster guys in the league. Even Sharangovich, though that extension in Calgary is not going to work for them. But there were pieces there, even Miles Wood, like that maybe weren't perfect, but they brought consistent enough scoring, whereas this season, not only did they get slower, but they're not getting that scoring. So I don't know. I've been back and forth. I haven't written about it because I haven't like fully formed my opinion, but I do think speed is a massive part. And this Devils team is a lot slower than they were even one season ago.
What do you got about that, Sam?
Well, I've always said that they needed to beef it up. And if you're going to sacrifice some speed, so be it. But I mean, this team, I mean, me personally, I like the team right now. I know it goes against the grain. I'm not drinking Fitzy's Kool-Aid like that. And what I meant by growing, I didn't mean rebuild or anything like that. What I mean is a team coming together at the right time. That's what I meant. I wasn't talking.
I didn't mean to bite your head off. I just was sitting here.
Yeah.
I
didn't disagree with you, Sam. I just said just going off of what Ace said.
Because what I really meant to say is, look, Jack is out. Let's see what this team's got. Sometimes teams come together during those type of moments, but regardless, with the speed, I mean, speed kills. Dan, I truly believe that, but at the same time, there were times, in the past 2 or 3 seasons where just they would just get bullied around, and you just can't have that. You have to be, like I said before about the Florida Panthers, and the playoff hockey. It's all territorial. It's all taking up space and just not giving the opposition any room to operate. And sometimes again, having that brawn helps down the line. I mean, we saw in the last season's playoffs. I mean, it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal at times. And that's what the Devils need. And that's why they got Pesce blocking shots. I mean, there's a lot of things that these guys do behind the play that fans don't really think about. They do a lot of the dirty work. You got to win the battles in the corners. You've got to just establish positioning. And, Stefan Nason in the first half of the season, I mean, he had a nose for the net, and he was scoring goals. And I'd like to see the team get back to that type of hockey.
Trey?
I mean, here's the thing. I'm going to relate what Sam said because I do agree, which is look what happened to the Devils a couple years ago in the playoffs when they had to play the Carolina Hurricanes. The Devils had a lot of speed that year. I think they were one of the fastest teams in the NHL, if I'm not mistaken. And when they played Carolina, it was an absolute beatdown for Carolina because what did they do? They slowed down the Devils' speed in neutral ice. And the thing is what I like about adding more physicality is that I think this really does help you come playoff time because the thing is when you have to beat a team 4 times out of 7 in many rounds in order to hoist the cup at the end of the year. So I think adding players like Stefan Nason, Brendan Dillon, Paul Cotter, you need that physicality because last year the Devils were a little soft. I think everyone can agree to that. So in my opinion, I'm willing to sacrifice some speed in order to get more physicality because I think that helps during the playoffs, at least from what I noticed a few years ago when the Devils played the Carolina Hurricanes in the second round.
Yeah, I'm an old school fan, and I still believe in the old school principles of, heavier, edgier, more violent was Fitzy's mantra in the offseason. And it's not like he signed these guys that have, no talent. Like Cotter started off on a tear. Nason started off on a tear. I think Nason's 6th on the team in scoring. And so I don't think that he overemphasized the physicality. And if I'm being honest, I think as a team, they still are below average toughness, in my opinion. People point to the hit stats and it's great. They hit a lot, but in the end, I still don't think that equates to toughness. And to someone else's point, I don't remember when the playoffs begin, if they get in, playoff warfare is a very different brand of hockey. And I don't even know with the Nason, and I think Nason and Cotter would be playoff dogs for sure. But I think a lot of these guys, once that begins and it gets very uncomfortable, they're going to have to adapt. And we've only seen a very small sample size for a lot of the guys that were already here. And then last point on that is if he indeed did overemphasize, we didn't see any sign of that through the first almost 3 months of the season. The team was one of the best in the league. And so it all looked like everything was working out great and the new additions were looking great. Everyone was praising Kovacevic. Pesce was the calming influence. He looked like he was tremendously helping Luke's growth and development. Cotter and Nason came out super hot on the score sheet. Markstrom obviously playing well. And so it was all of these things looked like they were working. And then all of a sudden just fell off a cliff. And so I guess I'm going to use that kind of as my next kind of question to everyone is, What exactly do you believe is the reason for the dramatic fall off at the holiday break?
I mean, if you look at the numbers, even when the Devils were the second best team in the league, they were 16th in even strength scoring per 60 minutes. So I think it was just kind of an unsustainable heater from guys like Cotter and Nason, and the power play as a whole, really. I mean, if there was a point where it felt like Nason was a lock for a power play goal every other night. And I think at one point, Nason was on pace for like 50-something goals and Cotter for like 38. Like, there was just no way that was even close to sustainable. And then you had like someone like, take Eric Halla, for example. Like, he was solid in the beginning of the season. He had, I think, like 11 points in his first 21 games, something like that. Like, he was holding his own as a third line center. And then he obviously hit that downfall. And then you had, I mean, the top nicohischier as well, actually. He was on a heater. I mean, there was a point where I think him and Cole Caulfield kept going back and forth for the NHL goals lead. And that's not saying nicohischier's been bad since then, but he cooled off a little bit. And it really just became the Jack Hughes show. And they were able to get by with the power play being so hot. The penalty kill was very, very good. And it still is for the most part if you look at the numbers. But I think after January 1st, even for the top guys, like everyone kind of just cooled off a bit. I think if you look at the scoring rates from October to the new year, and then from like January 1st to February 1st, the scoring rates of all the top guys, Bratt, Hischier, Meier, Hughes, all were basically slashed in half in that span. And then they started to pick it up a little bit, but then you had the bottom six guys ice cold. So they just never really were all meshing at once as they did. But I think there were signs of that from the very beginning when, like I said, the Devils everything was great. That game against the Rangers, they're way past the Rangers. They have like a 20-point cushion or something like that. And if you look at the underlying numbers, their even strength scoring was still basically middle of the pack definition of mediocre. But no one really cared about that, nor should they. I mean, at the end of the day, when your record is significantly above 500 and you're towards the top of the standings, your inclination is to feel that whatever you're doing is working. But unfortunately, that was not the case, and we saw how ugly it got after January. So I think it was just a lot of things that were clicking, then not clicking. Also, I don't know how much you all use advanced stats, but to put it simple, the advanced stats show that for as bad as the goaltending was last year, the finishing this season has hurt the Devils more than goaltending did last season. And last season, goaltending was a tremendous issue. According to Natural Stat Trick, I think it's like 30 goals below expected that the Devils have scored this season. And I mean, you add 30 goals, extrapolate that out through their 62 games or whatever it's been, 64. I mean, that's probably 4 or 5 more wins, maybe even more than that, 6, 7 wins. And it's a completely different narrative right now. I mean, how many times have we seen golden chances or how many times the Devils get quote unquote goalied against goalies who aren't considered to be in the elite ranks of the National Hockey League? With the guys on the current roster, like they've had their chances, and I don't even know if snake bitten's the right word, because it seems just like a general lack of finishing talent, but also snake bitten at times. Like
Timo has been just, there was so many for like, it was just weeks on end. And it was like, oh my God, people kill me about Timo. I love Timo. I'll always defend him. I always tell people there's more than just the pure stats and, all the little things he does, but like people see the contract, and with Timo, they're just looking for goals. And they're like, oh, he's doing this, he's doing that. And I got shanked up for weeks defending Timo, but it was just like a historic, just chance after chance. And you're like, how did none of these go in until it finally did? But
I have been called probably every name in the book on Twitter for defending Timo Meier. And like, I don't care. I'll stand by it. Like just the eye test alone, like, I mean, and the way he just bulldozes through the opposition, like the Devils don't really have anyone like that who also is capable of producing that high level of offense. And he's just been insanely snake bitten. Like, you look at the chances he's creating and how many posts and crossbars, or the amount of times he shot it right into the goalie's chest. Like, the chances were there. So I think maybe the whole March Madness thing, maybe Meier steps it up now in terms of finishing, but in every other aspect, I mean, his defensive game is way better than it ever has been in his career. And at the end of the day, you want your guy who's getting paid the big bucks to help the team more than he hurts it. And even though his finishing hasn't been there, I think he's like a plus 12 or something like that. He's been significantly – the Devils score way more goals when they're on the ice than the opposition does when Timo Meier's on the ice. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. Yes, I get the whole contract thing. You sign this guy, but people expect him to be a 40-goal scorer. He's until Jack went down, he was not on the top power play. That's not realistic. There's no one in the league who's scoring 40 goals at even strength, most likely. Like, you need the power play as part of that, unless you have like a Austin Matthews last season who scored 69 goals. But I mean, that's a unicorn. So I almost feel bad for Timo, the amount of hate he gets, because I mean, you see he's working his ass off every night, and he's an intimidating presence, and his work behind the net. And I mean, how many times does he just plow guys over? I mean, it's something the Devils need. So yes, the goal scoring isn't there, but if you look at even strength numbers, he's not too far off from where he was in San Jose. He's just not getting that power play time. I think he has like 2 or 3 power play goals this season. There were seasons in San Jose where he had 17, and that's not to say necessarily he 100% needs to be on the power play, because the Devils' power play has been great for the most part. Not as much lately, but now he's there. Like, you're not going to fault the team if the power play is going well and Timo's not on it, but you also can't expect him to score 17 power play goals a season and have 40 goals when he's not on the power play. I think that benchmark needs to be more towards, with Jack Hughes healthy and Meier on power play too, I think the expectation needs to be more around like 25 to 30 goals for Timo.
Clip that there for a second. I want to come back on Timo in a minute. Go ahead, Sam. What do you got on the decline, on the post-Christmas decline?
Ever since that Marty Necas Oscar performance of being injured, I can't explain it. I can't explain it. It just seemed like the switch turned off, the intensity, coming from the team. I don't know. I can't explain it. A lot of teams, throughout the years, sometimes they go through a lull period. They start off hot, and then between January and March, they just kind of dip, and then suddenly they just start to rise when April comes around. I can't explain it. The first third of the season, I mean, the Devils, they had that pizzazz, they had that buzz about them, and that intensity. But it just seems like, I mean, there was a play, insignificant play the other night, like someone knocked into Markstrom, and nothing was done about it. Nothing was done about it, and it just seemed. There were years, if you remember a few years ago, like nicohischier would just get abused, and nobody would do anything about it. And I think it was a Tatar that one time that it's like a little too late. It's like late in the third period, decided to do something about it. And you can't allow these things to happen out in the ice. Again, it's you want to dictate the play, you want to intimidate, and you want to keep your opponents honest. So I mean, that's the kind of hockey I like to see. The Devils they have the skill, they have the speed, they have a lot of great young players, but they need to put some muscle on the bones.
What do you got on the collapse, Trey?
Well, I think it's safe to say that before the injury, Jacobmarkstrom was saving the Devils bacon a lot. Like, he making some of those godly saves. But in terms of what Daniel and Sam said, I think I agree with them both in a sense, which is like Paul Cotter, he got off to a red hot start, but I knew that wasn't sustainable. But I was like, you know what? As long as Paul Cotter is racking up the hits, playing physical, I will take him every day and twice on Sunday over Alexander Holtz. And I still will, because I think that's what Paul Cotter is meant to do, but he's not a scorer. Eric Holla, I expect just a little bit more from Halsey, if I'm being completely honest, because I know he's supposed to take the pressure off of some people's shoulders, like doing the dirty work in the corners and all of that, but he hasn't really been doing that. And I just think for the Devils, just that spark, it was gone. Like as soon as Christmas break was over, it just was a downward spiral, and they could never snap out of it. And the last time they won 2 games in a row, you would have to go back to late January. So I think it's in their head a little bit. And Stefan Nason even said post-game one time that it comes down to care. Simple as that. So I think mentally they could not get out of it. And I think just like people overperforming, like players like Paul Cotter, Eric Holla at the beginning of the year, I knew they were going to fall off, not by that much though. So I just think for New Jersey, it's like they also never learned how to win close-knit games. What do I mean by that? Well, Sheldon Keefe said, like, you can win a game 1-0, but the Devils never mastered that. Or 2-0, but they could never do that. It was like if their offense was off, most likely they were going to lose the game. And you can't do that because, like I said before, you got to win 4 times out of 7 in many rounds of the playoffs. Like the teams are going to scout you heavily. So my thing is they need to learn how to win tight-knit games, and they haven't mastered that yet. So that's where I think the fall-off is. Mentally, players overperforming, punching above their weight class, and not mastering winning close-knit games.
So fair point. They've been this kind of run and gun, potent offense team for a couple of years now. But during the first few months of the season, when they were looking like they were going to be a powerhouse, is it me or did it seem like they had a different swagger? And it was like, when there was scrums and things, like it was just way more active. We were leading the league in fights, I think even a couple months into the season. And then it just kind of seemed like they were neutered almost, like as if, again, not to be conspiratorial, but there was a directive from above, like no more fighting. We went from December 23rd was the Ranger game. Both Cotter and Dillon fought in that one. There wasn't another real fight again until the Utah game last week. Pesci did get hit with a fighting major in a game, which was BS. His gloves never came off. But you're talking about, over 2 months of no fight. And again, I'm not going to say that, fighting means you automatically win, but it just seemed like the team overall just was feistier and just had a different swagger about them when this was all happening.
I would agree with you because Bill Spalding even said it on air one time, saying that this team was special. He said that at some point, like late in December. And Bill said the same thing when I interviewed him. And he said the same thing a few years ago when the Devils won, 52 games during the 2022-2023 season. I do agree with you, Ace. They have lost that spark a little bit. And I think with just all the losing, the inconsistencies, the frustrations, the question marks, it does take a toll on you. So I think just going back to what I said, it's just how it is.
Not that I necessarily disagree, but I think at the end of the day, winning cures everything. And actually, Jack Hughes even said that to me in December when I asked him about the vibes around the team. And just literally in every facet, when a team's winning, everything just feels so much better than it is. And then vice versa, when the team's losing, everything feels so much worse than it is. So I don't disagree with your point, but I think because of the constant winning, it almost creates like an aura around the team that's like, damn, this team is good. So now it's kind of like a shell shock when they hit a wall. And again, with Jack Hughes' team almost fully healthy for the most part, they were playing sub 500 hockey. So to go from the highest of the highs to the lowest of the lows that quick, that's going to make any fan base feel like it's a disaster. And when you're a diehard sports fan, I mean, obviously me as a journalist, I'm able to look at it a little more objectively, but if we were talking about my beloved New York Mets, I would feel the same way, and I would understand that emotion. So I think it's all really, not all, but mostly perspective at the end of the day. And like I said, when you're going from that elite level to just playing like bottom of the barrel hockey,
terrible.
It's going to throw people for a loop, and I think that's what we've seen.
So you just think once they get to losing ways, they just kind of collapse?
In a sense, and I think everything just gets magnified so much more. Whereas if they were finding ways to squeak out wins, if they were getting that depth scoring in this time and winning a few more games here and there, they would still have plenty of cushion. Everyone would be feeling good, and Jack Hughes healthy as well. Obviously, that just completely makes everything feel negative around the team. So I think it's kind of a combination of things.
What do you got, Sam?
Oof. You know, great teams find ways to win. I know that sounds cliche, and it's a copycat league. And the Devils, for the most part, during the rebuild, were trying to copy what the Pittsburgh Penguins, what their success was. But right now, the model right now, in my mind, are the Florida Panthers. Even when you see the Florida Panthers down like 3-0, they find ways to just shake things up during the game, whether it's a Kachuk booming hit or Bennett scrapping with somebody, just to kind of like you could have a 3-0 lead against the Florida Panthers, but somehow one play swings the momentum, especially in the playoffs. And then suddenly the momentum switches to the Florida Panthers because they figured a way to just kind of stop the bleeding and take the game and win. And that's what I think I'd like to see what the Devils do or figure out down the stretch is okay, you're down 2-0. So what? Figure a way to get back in the game and win. I just don't think they're there yet. It just seems like they have a lot of leaders on this team right now, but they don't have that it factor yet. For whatever reason, something's missing where they would become a good team to an elite team, and I just don't think they have it right now.
I can tell you what's missing. It's the bottom six as a whole. I mean, like, if we're being honest, they got basically no production. I mean, the stat that blew my mind when Curtis Lazar scored, I think it was in Utah, it was the first time since November that the Devils got a goal from a center not named Jack Hughes or nicohischier. November.
Are you sure about that?
I'm positive. And if you're asking, the NHL lists Dawson Mercer as a wing.
Yeah, because I was about to say, but what about Dawson Mercer? He's a center too, or
he's listed. This is according to the NHL listings. He's listed as a wing. So that's what, over 3 months that you didn't get a goal from a center not named Hughes or Hischier. I mean, how can you expect to win that way? And I'm not saying these guys have to be point per game players, but you got to chip in occasionally. I mean, even someone like Curtis Lazar last season was holding his own offensively at a career year in that regard. And this season, obviously some injuries, but he hasn't chipped in nearly as much as he did last season.
The bottom six just absolutely fell off a cliff. It is definitely going to be a point of emphasis, I'm sure, for Fitz in the summer. I've said he's going to have to do a damn near gut reno on that, and that'll be one of the definite major projects on his list. I'm going to jump to, we'll start with Trey. Team MVP so far.
Let me think about that. I would say Jack, but he got injured. I'm going to go with Jacob Markstrom. I don't think the Devils are in this position if it weren't for elite goaltending. And when was the last time we could say that as Devils fans, that the goaltending really carried the team? Because the last few years, that's been the biggest complaint for New Jersey, is their goaltending. So if it weren't for Jacob Markstrom, in January, making some of those godly saves and basically keeping his team in the game, I don't think the Devils are in a playoff position. So in my humble opinion, Jacob Markstrom, team MVP, no questions asked.
Who do you got, Sam?
It's funny you say that because I would say Markstrom, but when he was out, the goaltending was fine. It was good enough, but Markstrom does have that if factor. I'm going to go with nicohischier. That would be my pick. I think he's been consistent throughout the entire season, and he's elevated his game. So
I mean, I know he's down for the count, but I have to go Jack Hughes. The guy was on the ice for 66% of the Devils' goals since the new year.
That's brutal. That's such a damning stat on the rest of the guys on the team.
And see, this is what I'm talking about. That's not a recipe for success come playoff time. You know what that tells me? That's easy to defend the Devils, which is if you're able to take Jack Hughes out the equation somehow, some way, rough him up a little bit, you're going to beat the New Jersey.
That's also, I would say, though, pretty damning on whoever built the team. If your team, and I've said this for a couple weeks now, if you're gonna just pack in the season when one guy goes down and the team is essentially a house of cards propped up on one guy, that's clearly, and especially in hockey of all sports, like maybe in basketball or something, you'd expect that. But for a hockey team, if you're just going to pack in the season because one guy goes down, that means your roster is significantly flawed, in my opinion.
Now, let me remind everyone, the Devils do not have a first-round pick this year. However, the pick they used to get Jacob Markstrom, that first-round pick, it is top 10 protected, but I think we're well past that point. So the Devils got to make the playoffs. They don't have a choice.
So, Daniel, you went Jack. We got Jack, Nico, Markey. I'm also going to go Markey. I'm a goalie guy. To Sam's point, Jake Allen and Dawes, obviously in the small sample space, Dawes has looked, amazing as well in his starts. But I'm going to go with Markey just because I think he kind of set the tone early in the season. They were on a little bit of rocky footing before they finally hit their stride before he got hurt. And then he had that crazy stretch in, mid to late December through early January where he really looked like he was going to at least get the invite to Vegas as a nominee for the Vezina. So I am going to go with him, but I do think, circling back on how all of the goalies have looked pretty good, I think is a credit to a revamped defense that last year looked like absolute Swiss cheese. And with all the new guys, and obviously Luke being a little more mature, has taken a turn for the positive, which is why I still have hope, despite Jack Hughes and 66 or whatever it was, 66% of the goals. If they could kind of morph their game to the playoff warfare hockey without Jack, embrace trying to win, low scoring games the old school Devils way, I still think they have a chance. And some people will call me crazy, but you look at the roster, they still have some top end skill. Timo and Bratt, Nico, Luke on the back end. Like, for people just to dismiss them because Jack Hughes went down, I understand, Jack obviously is a huge part of the offensive production, but am I crazy to believe that they could, especially if Markstrom gets hot, if they make the playoffs, that they could go on a run?
Anything is possible, but I'm keeping my expectations anywhere from moderate to low.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially you mentioned Luke, that he's such a wild card because if he steps up the way he stepped up lately, I mean, he's always had the potential, but the way he's kind of rounded out his defensive game this season, and now he's starting to take charge of things offensively, I mean, he has that potential, and I think if it's going to happen, poor Luke Hughes is going to be so gassed after the season. I mean, Luke's going to be playing probably 25 plus minutes every single night, but he's someone who at times has put it all together and shown he could take over a game. And I mean, his skating's tremendous, but I think he's someone who can really kind of step it up. He's one of the very few that has the skill set that can do so. And obviously you need the top guys to be going as well. But especially with Hamilton out, like, Luke Hughes is really going to be the driving force of the back end and really the entire team. I think it's a great circumstance for him. And again, that goes back to my point from the very beginning that making the playoffs is still so valuable. That experience that they're going to get and just the feeling as a group, like, hey, like, we're without Jack Hughes. We were put to this test and we conquered it. Even if it wasn't perfect, like, even if they play slightly over 500 hockey and get in. Like, they still had to be winning a good chunk of games without Jack, with all the pressure on them. A team could easily just mail it in and cave, and it could be ugly. So it's really important that this team is going to just, as a group, collectively come together and make a push for this thing. And I think the fans want playoff hockey. Like, even if they're only getting a couple home games because they get bounced pretty quick, like, that's still something that's respectable as an organization. And I know some people are going to be like, well, like, the bar's on the floor right now, but you have to look at it realistically with Jack Hughes out. I mean, if any team has their 1C as Jack Hughes and they lose him, your odds significantly go down, no matter who you are. Now, other teams would be better equipped to handle it than the Devils, but regardless, it's a massive blow. So, I mean, they did it in Philly, but even Philly was a 2-1 game. It was close, but like you said, with the defense, I think they've given up the second or third fewest goals in the NHL this season. They have the ability to beat any team 2-1, especially if Markstrom is hot. I mean, look how they competed with Dallas. If they limit the odd man rushes a little bit, they beat that Dallas team. So, and that was a rare one for them. The defense usually, I mean, odd man rushes are so much fewer and further between compared to how they were in seasons past. So they have the capability to do it. They just got to put it all together.
Sam?
Well, you know, after this trade deadline, I think the expectations are low, and the bar is low. But if Sheldon Keefe can get over that first round hump, I think that it's going to go a long way. You know, again, sometimes, guys, when the playoff comes around, you see players that were mediocre during the regular season start to perform. But at the same time, I don't want to hang on that hope. But I think right now, the Devils, they're going to have to take one step at a time, one game at a time, and they got to build on what they did against the Philadelphia Flyers. Tomorrow's game is a huge game because you're playing the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets, what they've been through this season, I mean, but right now it's the Devils in some ways control their own destiny. They just got to win and beat these teams down the stretch. So, but, you know, again, my expectations are low, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if they do get in the playoffs and they do make it to the second round.
All right, so I'm going to circle back on that in 1 second. I want to get one other question in there before we start talking about that. I'll start with Sam on this one, and then we'll go to Trey and then Daniel. Who are you looking to or expecting to step up for these last 17 games of the regular season? Who's got to be the guy to carry the load?
Well, obviously it's nicohischier, but if you want to look from the bottom six, I think Cody Glass is going to surprise everybody down the stretch.
Trey?
I'm going to go with the best player in the NHL, Jesperbratt, because just a little inside joke on Twitter for anyone who doesn't know. But I'm going with Jesperbratt for this case because with Jack Hughes out, Bratter has to be the guy that carries a lot of the offense. And he and Jack have been doing that all season long. Now, here's Jesperbratt's time to really shine because despite being an all-star last year, despite leading the team in points last year, I think Jesper is still very underrated in the NHL. So I am going with JB63.
Daniel?
I'm going timomeier. I mean, we saw what he did last March mostly with Jack out of the lineup, and if he puts together another 17 goals in 21 game stretch, I mean, the Devils are in the playoffs, I think, almost 100%. There's not many other players in the league who are capable of putting together stretches like that. And yes, he hasn't done that this season, but we know he has it in him. And especially he's going to be getting that power play time now too, and that could work to his benefit. So I think timomeier is someone who, and if timomeier steps up, I mean, the portion of the fan base that hates him, if he basically carries them into the playoffs, we're going to see a very quick tune change from a lot of people. And I think he's capable of it. His work ethic, his attention to detail in his defensive game, it's all been admirable, and he just needs to step up. And I'll throw a slight honorable mention to Daniel Sprong, because he's someone who in the past has really played well at even strength, or at least scored a hefty amount of points. And he has a lethal shot. He's someone who the opposition fears, but he just can't play defense worth anything. But if you have all these defensive guys around him, which the Devils' bottom six, even if they're not producing, are very solid defensively, if you could find those matchups and give Sprong his 12, 13 minutes a night against the other team's third, fourth lines and let him cook, I mean, this is a guy who was fifth in the entire NHL the last 2 seasons coming into this one in even strength scoring per 60 minutes, yet found himself in the AHL because his attention to detail on defense was borderline laughable. But Sheldon Keefe talked about that. He said, we're going to work on it. It was great in Philly. Keefe commended it after the game. And if this is a guy, I mean, I think he scored 40-something, 50-something points just last season, and that's with fairly limited ice time. If he's able to kind of round out that defensive game and just be serviceable and maybe give him more like 14 minutes a night, he's a guy who could go on a heater, and he has done that in the NHL in the past. So it was a very low risk, high reward move from Tom Fitzgerald. Obviously, fans would have liked to see more, but Sprong still has that potential to really take up some of that offense. And then maybe if he's going offensively, other guys in the bottom six start chipping in. I mean, you saw some of the chances they created in Philly. Like it was very rare that you even saw that chance generation from the bottom six at any point. And with these new guys in, like you said, Cody Glass, like maybe that's just those new faces, that new energy being injected. And again, like we're not looking for this team to win 16 games the rest of the season. Like they just got to play slightly above 500 and they're definitely in. So the Columbus game, huge test. Maybe Mrs. Fields will get a first win too, but yeah, we'll see.
See, it's good to have dreams, not delusions.
I'm also going to go with Timo Meier. We saw his March last year. I believe he led the league, entire league in goals. Coincidentally, leading up to my next thing with Timo, that was when Travis Green was running the team as an interim head coach. Timo was on the right side on power play one, to Daniel's earlier point. So as these games become kind of a playoff down the stretch, I'm looking for Timo to just get them any way possible, whether they're from the slot, ugly ones, power play goals, whatever it is. As these games get more of a man's game, I'm looking for Timo to reemerge with some March magic as well down the stretch. But I wanted to throw this out there because of I forget who put it out. Someone put out, and Daniel, you're I guess going to be the stats guy on the panel here. There was some detailed stats regarding Timo on the left side and the right side, and tons of fans have wanted to see him back on the right side because of what we saw last year and on power play one. And someone put out a bunch of numbers and then basically tried to say that the left and right thing was just like a fallacy, even though the advanced stats he was using, I believe, still showed Timo did better by a little chunk on the right side. And that's with the fact of completely ignoring the actual goal production difference from left to right side. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that with Timo, in terms of left wing versus right wing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's somewhat of a middle ground there. I don't think it's as big of a difference as people are making it out to be, but at the end of the day, you could look at advanced stats all you want. I mean, you still have the eye test. I think that's still important. I always try to leverage both. And yes, Timo's goal production alone on the right side is definitely higher. So I understand both angles, but I think at this point, it doesn't really hurt. Though Timo himself has said that it doesn't make a difference to him.
He could say that all he wants, but if you see whenever he has the puck in open ice, he literally drives the right side every single time. And I know, Sam, I think you played, I don't know, Daniel, if you've ever played or Trey, but as a lefty, he loves the move where he'll drag the puck with his right hand and he'll pull it back and use his body to crush people, cut to the middle, and then he pulls it back on his forehand and rips it. And that's why you see tons of right wingers or left-handed shots like he is with the eye test, like you said, you could see his preference during the game. You just watch him. You'll see where he goes. What do you think is the reason why he's been cemented on the left side?
I mean, I don't know if it's just the organization asking him and him saying, I don't care. which it's really tough to say unless you have him on this podcast. But
let me call him. Hold on 1 second. Let me just.
Yeah, it's really hard to know the exact reason, but I mean, maybe he just doesn't want to be like a diva, and he's just like, all right, like whatever they want me to do, I'll do, which I respect, certainly, obviously.
No, so do I. But at what point did you say, this is one of our best guys? Like, instead of, I just think it's because they feel like that's the best kind of overall lineup they get, because his fall off is not dramatic on the left side. So he's kind of a casualty of trying to round out the best lineup. But it's like, at this juncture, we've been, struggling for goals for so long. Like, why don't you put one of your best snipers in his best position possible to try to maximize it? I don't know. What do you think about that, Sam?
Well, yeah. I mean, wherever you have success, you go with it. I mean, I don't put too much stock in these stats to begin with. It's whatever you feel most comfortable with, and, sometimes, we should really ask the goaltender. Sometimes players, if they're on their strong side, sometimes they hide the puck better, or the puck comes off their stick a little bit quicker. Who really knows why? But again, if it works out on the right side, I would play him on the right side. But I don't put too much stock in a lot of these stats. But that's just me.
Anyone else have anything else on the Timo?
I've said it on my show. I'll say it again. I absolutely hate advanced analytics. No disrespect.
Sorry, Daniel.
No disrespect to anyone who uses. No disrespect to anyone who uses advanced analytics. I despise it. But there's one thing I do believe in, which is the eye test, like Daniel said. And the eye test for me is that Timomeier needs to play on the right side, top power play unit, to get the best out of his skill set. We saw it last year when Travis Green took over. And look, Timo was asked about this. I think Ryan Novozinski asked him this when Ryan was still covering the Devils for NJ.com. He was like, what changed for you? Because Timo's numbers got better once Lindy Ruff was fired. And Timo said, like, just the change of where he was positioned, like playing on the right side, playing on the top power play unit, it helped him. So I hate advanced analytics, absolutely despise it. But the one thing I will commend is passing the eye test.
Anyone got anything else on the whole Timo? I think, I think the advanced analytics have their place. I do think in the past few years, it's fueled entirely too many things. I do think that they're now over kind of utilized. And I do fear that organizations, and possibly including the Devils, rely on them almost exclusively to make, whether it's personnel decisions or position things. I do think that the eye test has almost gone by the wayside for the most part for some of the stuff. But I do think they have their usages in different scenarios. And one of them I do think is kind of crazy. My biggest gripe with all of it is the kind of coddling of the goaltenders, which I know the great Martin Brodeur is totally on my side with that. Growing up watching him play, and they say, oh, the game's different, this and that, but he was playing, 75, 77 games. And now it's like, if a guy hits 54, all of a sudden it's like, you're abusing the guy and he's got to rest. So I just, I think they situationally make sense. But to just solely go on them, I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, like saying like, oh, he hits the puck harder in this situation on this particular day against this opponent. I don't give a crap about advanced analytics. I hate it. I hate it in baseball. I hate it in hockey. I hate it. No disrespect to anyone who does like advanced analytics. I'm just not a numbers person. Math was never my strong suit.
Go ahead, Daniel.
I think because there have been times I've seen posts and like it'd be like, oh, Timo Meier's XQYZ per 7264 is not as high as the tire pressure. Like there at some point you have to be like, okay, like what are we doing here? But I think there are times that stats that aren't advanced analytics just get confused as advanced when you present them to people. Like there are times I'll post a lot of things on like goals allowed per 60 or scoring chances per 60. And like those aren't really like advanced. Those are just the numbers of what's happening. And I think because people have, and somewhat reasonably, become so angry at seeing all these spreadsheets and numbers and it just hurts their head. It's like, I just want to watch sports and enjoy them. They instantly just turn a blind eye to them. And I've had a few people in the past reply to my tweets being like, nobody cares about advanced stat. And then I'll be like, what's advanced about this stat? And then they'll delete the reply. And it's like I understand both sides. And like I said, analytics are taking over too much of the world. And I think you still need those kind of minds. Like I always compare it to baseball. Like you have people who went to Harvard who have never played baseball or watched baseball in their lives now making influential decisions for an organization. I think there has to be some kind of line there. But at the same time, surface level stuff and sometimes occasionally advanced stuff, but they can be useful. Like if you see, for example, that when Kovacevic is paired with ex-defensemen, the Devils give up double the scoring chances as when he's with wide defensemen. Like that could be very useful. And you know how to tailor things as a result of that. But then when you start getting into all the mathematical formulas and the stuff that like you need to take a whole class to comprehend, like that's where it gets too far to me. So I just think you need a balance of both.
All right, I'm jumping to the next one. I'm going to start with Sam. Official prediction: how do the Devils finish the next 17 regular season games?
Ooh. I'm gonna say 500.
So give me an exact record. 17 games.
Well, it can't be 500. 17 games. 8. Let's say 8, 6, and 3.
Trey?
They are going to limp across that finish line. I am hoping for at least a wild card spot. That's what I will say. So 17 games.
Yep.
Remember, math is not my strong suit. I'm going to say 6, 10, and 1.
Oh my God. Say it ain't so. What do you got, Daniel?
Is 6 10 putting them in the playoffs? I don't think so.
I don't think it will be.
I mean, the Rangers are falling off a little bit. They just lost badly to the Blue Jackets. Like I said, guys, math is not my strong suit.
So we said what, 17? I'll go 8, and yeah, that's 17. 8, and 1.
So 17 more points. You think they finish at 91? Man, you guys are. Yeah, maybe I'm just going to be a little bit delusionally optimistic.
Wait. But Ace, before you say yours, I'll just say this one thing.
You get one amend. If you want to amend it now, you can take it back now.
Okay, I will take it back. I'll take mine back because the Devils do have an easy schedule. They have one of the easiest schedules to close out the season. And I think the Blue Jackets and Rangers have one of the toughest schedules to close out the season. So I will improve the record to 7, 9, and 1.
Damn. Oh, ye of little faith. Even though the record is, the schedule is amongst the easiest, that almost worries me because we've seen the Devils kind of struggle with the lower ranking teams in the league. I'm going to go with a probably delusional, optimistic call, but I'm going to say somehow, some way, the New Jersey Devils find a way to go 10, 5, and 2, which would put them at 96 points for the season, which I'm hoping would be good enough to hang on to that third wild card spot. I'm sure I'm going to get flamed for that. But in the end, 10 and 7 essentially is not, I'm not picking them to be world beaters. 10, 5, and 2, that's what I'm going with. 96 points hopefully is enough for that third wild card spot. And then that's going to jump me to the next question. I guess we'll go the same order. How does that then how does their entire season end?
Sorry, Daniel.
No, I was just laughing. That's a deep question. If I think they're getting in, but just barely. If they're playing Carolina, I think they're done in 5 games. If they're playing anyone else that's not Carolina, I think they're taking it at least 6, and they can certainly pull out a win in 7.
So then, how does the whole thing end? You're saying second round ouster?
I forgot there has to be an
round?
end to
You're
this.
going second round ouster?
Yeah, I think second round at that point without Jackhughes. I mean that's really tough. They could put up a fight, make it 5, maybe 6, but I don't see him going past the second round.
Sam?
The homer in me says that they'll win the cup, but realistically,
yeah. Like I said, it's great to have dreams.
Yeah,
not delusions.
Because the bar set low, I think they'll get third round and then bounced.
So you think they make it to Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah,
Eastern Conference Finals.
All right, so now it's on you, Trey.
Without Jack, okay. Like I said, I want to have faith in my team, in the team I cover. I really do. I want to say that they can win it all, but I know that's not going to happen. If the season ended today, the Devils would play the Hurricanes in the first round. That's always a tough matchup. I would say aside from the Rangers, the Hurricanes are one of the toughest opponents the Devils have to face in the Metro. But if they slip to a wild card position, they would have to play the Capitals. And if they slipped even further in the wild card spot to the second place position, then they would play the Panthers. So it just progressively gets worse. All right. I'll say they hold on to, I think they're going to slip out of the Metro and like top 3 in the Metro, and they're going to fall to the first wild card spot, and they're going to play the Capitals. Honestly, I have no faith. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. Just based on what I've seen, this Devils team has not proven to me that they can be consistent enough to beat a team 4 times out of 7 in a rough and tough playoff series. So I'm sorry to be this person. The Devils are going to get bounced in the first round. They're going to limp to the finish line, and that's how it is.
I actually want to throw out a hot take. Well, before anything, if the Devils are playing the Capitals, Spencer Carberry has said multiple times the Devils don't match up well with the Capitals. The Devils have handled them pretty well this season. If the Devils end up playing the Caps, I'll throw out a hot take that we could almost see like the Tampa Bay Columbus series a few years back, where Columbus just came out of nowhere and swept them. I could see that happening. I know we don't, especially Trey does not like advanced analytics, but some numbers show that the Capitals have been quite lucky, and they have some talented guys on that. I mean, there's a reason you're first in the league. That doesn't happen by accident. But I could see them kind of just hitting a wall, especially if Ovechkin gets close to the record but doesn't break it. I think he will break it, but it's going to be a close call. Then you have him like, okay, like my playoff goals don't count. What's even the point? I mean, we saw him in the playoffs last season against the Rangers. I mean,
he was a cone. He was
a
cone.
It looked like he just didn't care, and he's won his cup already. I genuinely think the Capitals prioritize the goal record more than a Stanley Cup at this point, and maybe that's crazy to say, but that's how I feel. And if the Devils match up with the Caps, it would not be surprising to me. And maybe the Devils get on a bit of a shooting heater too to make up for all the lost finishes the entire regular season. But I could see the Devils making fairly quick work of the Capitals. Now, second round, they'd probably get bounced quickly. But I think if you're the Devils, given the Jackhughes injury, no matter the circumstance, if you win a round this season, you're happy. And then eyes turn to Tom Fitzgerald to add that extra scoring over the offseason. But I think you could be content with all the circumstances if the Devils do win a round.
Let me just remind everyone: if the season were to end today, the Devils would play the Hurricanes in the first round, second and third in the Metro, and then if they fell to the wild card position, the first spot, they would play the Capitals.
I'm going to keep my delusions going. In my scenario that they somehow go anywhere near 10-5-2, they come together as a somewhat new identity club in the post-Jack Hughes era for this season. They embrace old school Devils hockey, start grinding out wins, bring back a little bit of the heavier, edgier, more violent, feeling good going into the playoffs. And I'm sticking with my preseason prediction, Eastern Conference Finals. Somehow, some way, they come together down the stretch, somewhat new identity, and they shock a couple teams and make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I understand a lot of people are going to, ask for my dealer's number and what I'm smoking. But I'm going to give a little bit of an optimistic answer. I'm going to stick with it. I think, and the biggest factor for me, though, is the defense playing well, holding teams to minimal goals, and in Markstrom, we trust. I believe Markstrom is motivated. I think he is, one of the leaders on the team that wants to win more than anything. He's a fiery dude. I'm sure you guys have talked to him. I talked to him at an event for several minutes, and he wants to win more than anything, assuming there's no kind of lingering issues from his injury, which doesn't seem like it was in the couple games. The team shit the bed in front of him. But assuming they figure out a way to embrace these 2-1 games, somehow, some way, the New Jersey Devils get to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Okay. You know what, Ace? I'll give you some hope here. I'll give you some hope. All right. If let's just say the season ended today, Devils somehow make it past the Hurricanes. In the next round, they would either have to play the Blue Jackets or the Capitals. And to go off Daniel's point, theoretically, the Devils have handled those teams in the past, but they haven't proven to me that they could be consistent. But the teams that the Devils would avoid until the conference finals are the Panthers, the Maple Leafs, and the Lightning. They would avoid those teams. So as long as the Devils don't fall to the second wild card position, theoretically, I think they would have an easier road than some other teams. But I'm just saying, I'll give you some hope. I'll give you a slight amount of hope, not much.
Piggybacking on Daniel's thing, though, I feel like the Devils do match up better and would have a better chance of beating the Caps and the Canes. I'm hoping if we do play them, somehow we kind of exercise the demons. The Canes have owned us for years, going way back. But I do feel like, everyone's like, oh, the Capitals. And I do think there is going to be some sort of kind of hangover from the whole Ovechkin goal chase. Now, I don't know, if it's going to help or hurt them if he gets it or doesn't get, but I just feel like that being a headline the whole year and so much emphasis and focus in every city they go, it's a whole thing. Is there some sort of kind of fall off after he gets it or doesn't get it when the whole thing's kind of done? How does that affect them going into the playoffs? For whatever reason, it could be delusional. They've been a wagon this whole year, but I do feel like the Devils could beat them.
Yeah, I think for the Devils to do anything, at the bare minimum, they need Siegenthaler back. Because and not just back, but playing how he was in the regular season. Because we saw how he was last season trying to play through an injury, and he was just a complete shell of his former self. So Hamilton, in theory, they could get by if Luke Hughes is really stepping up. But Siegenthaler, you're going to need that shutdown pairing of Siegenthaler and Kovacevic in the playoffs if you want to win these 2-1 games. Because let's be realistic. Odds are, based on what we've seen, the Devils aren't scoring 4 or 5 goals a night in the playoffs.
Definitely not. I'm going to jump to the next one. Speaking of, having solid defense and goaltending this season, what I once thought was an easy question, I now think there's a couple different scenarios here. I guess we'll start with Sam on this one. What do you expect the goaltending tandem to be next season? And what do you expect it to be and what do you want it to be? I'll throw both out.
Well, I think Allen is gone. Obviously, it's Markstrom. But Dawes, when in that small sample size, he looked good. He definitely looked good. So I would go with Markstrom and Dawes.
Markstrom and Dawes, and that's what you think it's gonna be.
Yeah, but long term, it's not gonna be that.
No, we're just talking about next year. We're one year at a time. Trey, what do you got?
I'll say the same as Sam, which is if Allen is gone. Now, let me make this clear. I'm open to bring back Allen, but he might get a lucrative deal elsewhere because he is actually having a pretty solid showing this season. I think it's going to be Jacob. Obviously, Jacob Markstrom's returning. He has 1 year remaining on his contract. But Nico Dawes, he looked really good in the 5 games he played in so far this year. And keep in mind, one of those games, he only appeared in less than 2 minutes because Allen supposedly checked himself out the game due to cramping. But I think he was just frustrated. That was when the Devils took on the Avalanche. But Markstrom,
there was no cramps. That was nonsense.
Yeah, I don't blame Allen. The team was absolutely garbage in front of him. But digressing a little bit, Dawes, his goals against average was below 1. I think his save percentage was .966, and he recorded 1 shutout. So I think he is ready to be a backup and slow. And he was actually good last year, especially in that Stadium Series games. I think all of you were there for that. So I think, but the team was obviously not good last year, so his stats didn't really reflect his impact. So I'm going to go with Markstrom and Dawes.
Daniel?
Mikhail, you go. No, I'm kidding. I think it's going to be Markstrom and Allen. I think they're going to give Allen 1 more year. I think they just like having that steady veteran presence. And look, Dawes was absolutely tremendous, but I'm not making any decisions based on a 4-game and 2-minute stint. I've watched a lot of games in Utica. He's been very shaky. I've probably watched about half their games this season. And there have been a lot of times where he's let in some very soft goals and just looked rattled. And that's in the AHL. And look, props to him for stepping up when he's had to with the Devils. He was huge when Markstrom went down, both him and Allen. But I just think my gut is saying that the Devils are going to give Allen another 1-year deal, and then he'll be on his way, and they'll assess where the rest of their pipeline is for that future 1B. Well, I guess they're going to need a 1A with Markstrom too, but I think it's Markstrom and Allen next season.
I thought for sure, even heading into this season, that it would have been for next year, Markstrom and Dawes. I've gotten a sneaking kind of suspicion over the past couple weeks as well that like what seemed like the obvious play. I'm like, I still wouldn't bring back Allen personally, but it does seem like they do like to rely on, having the 1B guy be a veteran. It is sort of a gamble if you let him move on elsewhere and you're gambling on Dawes in a scenario where Markstrom gets hurt. But for some reason, I kind of thought that in the past couple weeks too. I'm like, I think they're probably going to bring Allen back again. But the reason I don't like that then is assume you'd be with a whole new tandem if you don't sign Markstrom for that 3rd year, right? So it's like, okay, if you run back Markstrom and Allen next year, if Markstrom was truly done at that point, then you're kind of starting from scratch and you're like, oh, are you going to go Dawes and Poulter, or, are you going to have 2 inexperienced guys? I do think if they do that with Allen, then I feel like you're almost stuck with, at a minimum, bringing Markstrom back for 1 more year and then having Dawes kind of be the understudy for at least a year before making him the starter or looking elsewhere in free agency or trade, whatever it is.
And I want the Devils to be very careful when it comes to Nico Dawes, because they've made the mistake of putting too much pressure on young goalie shoulders, which has resulted in injuries and derailing their careers a little bit. Examples are Corey Schneider, Mackenzie Blackwood. He's revived his career, however, good for him. I'm happy for him. And who is he? Akira Schmid.
Well, I think Schmid was they just call it lightning in a bottle. Like, he was never even really that highly regarded of a prospect at all. And I can't even explain like what that entire 22-23 season, like I can't explain anything. I mean, this is a guy who's getting lit up in the USHL like just a couple years before that, and he's dominating the Rangers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, that was just something else. But Ace, I get what you're saying with not wanting a new goaltending tandem from the previous year, a completely new one. I don't disagree, but at the same time, I think the Devils have some serious talent in their pipeline, so it's tough because you don't want to rely on those young guys, but at the same time, like Jakub Malik and Mikhail Yegorov specifically are looking pretty promising. And I mean, we saw what happened with how the Russian netminder in New York has went. Well, actually, I guess there's two of them, but both of them have had pretty solid careers, even though Igor got paid and suddenly is not playing well at all. But I mean, Yegorov, I've watched a few games of his, and he's just looked lights out. And I'm not saying, oh my God, like this guy's the number one of the future. So much could happen. But the Devils have to be pretty happy with where their pipeline is at. And then you still have guys like Poulter, Dawes. Those are probably the two big ones. But yeah.
It's a good problem to have. Let me get Sam's got to get out of here. Let me get to my last one here. Off-season kind of realistic and or unrealistic acquisitions for you, Sam, and then we'll let you get out of here.
What was the question again? Sorry.
Unrealistic or realistic and unrealistic off-season targets.
Realistic and unrealistic. Well, I've always been on the Brady Tkachuk bandwagon, so that's unrealistic. I like to troll with it. Realistic. Nobody really comes to mind. Maybe Brad Marchand.
No way he would come here, man. I mean, can't see it.
Would you believe that he would be with the Panthers just a few weeks ago?
No, but it unfortunately, that's if someone was like, where do you think he would go? He definitely had a hand in that. I don't even know if the story ever came out. But, if they're going to move a guy like that, most organizations are going to at least, they're not going to just send him somewhere out of nowhere. They'll give him that level of respect. Apparently he had a meeting with Sweeney and it didn't go however he wanted to. But I believe that was a place that he was like, I could fit in here and be on a competitive team. The unfortunate reality is I don't think guys like that in that scenario are saying, send me to New Jersey. I just don't think that's even remotely on almost anyone's mind, unfortunately. Hopefully one day we become that team where guys in a scenario like that would like to go. But I do think the average perception of veterans and guys like Marchand is probably like, I don't want anything to do with that place, if I'm being honest.
I mean, a lot crazier things have happened. I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to count anything out, but Marchand going to the Panthers, not on my bingo card, or Rantanen being dealt twice in the same season, not on my bingo card.
So who do you have any guys in mind that you would like to see them make a run at?
You see, I'm going to stick by to what I said last offseason, which is you don't need to break the bank here. You need to find a solid goal scoring contributor. That's what I'm looking for. Someone who can fit into your bottom six, because I think the Devils' top six is very good. But
very good.
Huh?
Very, very good.
I'm sorry. What did I say? I said
top six? Very good.
Well, you got jackhughes, nicohischier, that just
first four are good, but then where do we go?
That's what I'm talking about. You need to add more depth, more scoring depth. That's what I'm just saying. So I'm still looking at someone like maybe Donato a little bit. Like I'm still Ryan Donato's having a good year with the Blackhawks. You can look at him. Yanni Gourde, that could be interesting. I think he's a pending UFA this year. Could the Devils afford him? I don't really know, but he's someone I've discussed before. And unrealistic, Ace, I'll go with what you said over the offseason. Brady Tkachuk. But
everyone's on board now after the Four Nations tournament. Everyone's like, oh, people flamed me. You overvalue him. Listen, Senators fans are going to flame whenever you talk about a guy potentially getting moved. To me, it made all the sense in the world. In the offseason, when we had the number 10 overall pick, I thought there was a chance if we really tried to force their hand and offer an insane package. The dream kind of died for me now. But if Ottawa misses the playoffs, the chatter's gonna start ramping up again, and I will hold out a sliver of hope. But for me, the dream mostly died.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to happen. He even if he was available, you would be at the Senators' mercy because he has a few years remaining on his contract. That's the problem. So, yeah, like I said, my thing is you don't need to go big game hunting. You just need to find some more scoring depth. Okay, so you made physicality a point of emphasis last year. Just try to find some scoring depth. And I think Ryan Donato, based on what he's doing with the Chicago Blackhawks, that's someone I'm targeting just a little bit. And I'm actually curious to see what could possibly happen. But yeah, that's my offseason projection. That's my offseason projection.
What do you got, Daniel? Potential targets.
So I think the days of Andre Palat, Dawson Mercer, Tomas Tatar, even Stefan Nason in the top 6 have to be over. I think that's no shade to those players, but I mean, if you want to build a real top 6 here, when I look at the Devils lineup, I see a 6 foot, 203-pound size hole there, and that's the hole that Tyler Toffoli left. The Devils were almost scoring at will when he was on the team, and obviously their defense and goaltending was horrendous, so it didn't end up mattering, and then they got decimated with injuries. But he was on pace for I think it was 41 goals, something like that. Maybe I'm a little wrong. Actually, I have the number here. 26 goals in 61 games, so that's probably roughly 40-goal pace. I'm doing the math now because it's bothering me. 35-goal pace. Okay. So he was still on a 35-goal pace with the Devils. Who made up for that? No one. And that's why I'd want to target, realistically, someone like Brock Besser. I think he is getting sick of Vancouver. That's sure what it seems like. He's probably the closest to Tyler Toffoli-like player that's out there. Obviously, Toffoli's locked up for a while with San Jose, and he seems very happy there, even having sleepovers with his fellow teammates. I think Brock Besser just slots into that top 6 so perfectly, and he's not like that level of superstar where it's like, oh my God, like we bring this guy in, like what are we doing with the rest of the team? Like I think it would be more reasonable. So Brock Besser would be my number 1 target to me if you put him alongside like Jack Hughes. Jack's going to have that sniper there that really works with him just like Toffoli did. As for unrealistic targets, I'm going to say Mikko Rantanen.
Money? He signed.
Yeah, never mind. Don't listen to me.
He signed.
The second I said that, I'm like, wait,
And I'm glad you actually brought that up, Daniel, because here's the problem that the Devils are going to run into, which is you got to look at some of the players that are signed long-term. So like Timo Meier, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nicohischier, he'll have a couple years remaining on his contract. Andre Palat, then defenseman, Dougie Hamilton, Brett Pesce, Jonas Siegenthaler, now Jonathan Kovacevic. There's a lot of guys locked up long-term for the Devils. So they got to do with what they did with John Marino last year, which is you got to get someone off the books somehow, some way. Because if the Devils did not get John Marino's contract up and out of here, there's no way they could sign someone like Brett Pesce or Stefan Nason, players like that. So that's where I'm a little perplexed, which is like if the Devils want to go big game hunting, whose contract are you getting rid of?
Yeah, I mean, they have a few guys coming off the books, and the cap's going up as well. So, I mean, I think Luke Hughes' extension is going to be important. Hopefully, that's not too unrealistic of a number. It doesn't drag out either. But they're going to have room. But yeah, I mean, even if they do get a quote unquote big fish, they still need more. Like the bottom 6 isn't producing. The best case scenario for the Devils is that Eric Hall was playing hurt this whole season, and next season he's going to bounce back to who he was the first 2 years of his Devils tenure. Because, I mean, Eric Hall at his best is the ideal 3C. We saw that in 2022, 2023. Could win faceoffs, play on the penalty kill, good for like around 20 goals-ish, maybe a little less than that. But this season that has not been the case. And I think it's important that Cody Glass becomes someone who could be a 4C, because then you have Cotter, you have Glass, who's relatively cheap. He's an RFA now, so he should be under team control for a while. If he's someone that they feel could successfully fill that 4C role, you kind of have that set in stone. So you have guys like Nason, Mercer, Cotter, and Glass, and you really kind of need, if Hall is going to step up, well, it's going to tell a lot in these next few games. Then maybe you only need like one bigger fish and one bottom six, but it would be really unfortunate if they have to go searching for like 3 or 4, as it seemed like at times this season, because their production has just been so basically non-existent.
I like Besser. I do think you need the top 6. That was the thing. Like, I don't think Toffoli was worth the money that he got. In hindsight, you're like, oh, if you just transfer those goals here, not that it works that way, that'd be great. But I do think when Fitz didn't re-sign Toffoli, you had to then take that money, and whether you used a little more or less what he was asking for, you needed to get a bona fide top 6 to play with Jack and Jesper. And unfortunately, Palat, while I like him as a depth player, for him to be in your top 6, and obviously he's a target because of his contract, but for him to be on the top 6 playing with those guys all season long, that obviously is not doing your best to optimize your 2 best offensive players, in my opinion. And so if you could find a guy to play with those 2, if they do keep them together, I do love my peanut butter and jelly together, but I understand, if they try to split them up and maximize the potential for the rest of the lineup, I don't think you could go into next season with any sort of patchwork fix. I do think you need to get a guy like Besser or something like that, where it's like, okay, this will not be a question mark anymore. Similar to how like the goaltending last year was like, here's your goaltender. But with all the bottom 6 revamping that's necessary, I do fear it might be a tall order. I did think we were going to chip away at all these needs at the deadline. In my opinion, very little chipping was done. And so for it all to happen in one offseason, it might be a lot. It was a big offseason last year as well. But if the big winger doesn't come in, while it might not fix your top 6 per se, unless you switched him to wing, I do love Sam Bennett. I do think he's going to get a ton of money. But I do think, back to what I think Sam was saying about who's the real leader and all this stuff and blah, 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 I do think there has to be sort of a culture shift. Not entirely, but when you look at the team, it's like, yeah, who are the real leaders? Dylan, Markstrom, who is going to be the guy they really rally around, who has the playoff experience that'll kind of set the tone. And it does seem like when you look at this roster, especially compared to old Devils teams, or you see perennial playoff teams even now, you're like, who are those guys here? And I don't know that I could give you an easy answer.
Like I said, just what it comes down to me is just financially. Like, I need to see what they do with Luke Hughes and his contract, and then I need to see what they could possibly do with getting rid of another big contract. That's my thing, which is why I'm right now aiming low, that, buy low but sell high. I'm hoping that you take a gamble on someone and it pans out. Like, take a flyer on a player that might fall under the radar, but they have tremendous upside. That's what I'm hoping for. But until the Devils do something with one of those contracts, I'm gonna keep my expectations moderate for the off season.
I think with the cap going up, now is the time to go get that big fish, because they're only going to get more expensive. If you could lock someone up, that's, with the way the cap's going up, that's not going to be nearly as detrimental. And not only that, I mean, 3 guys locked up for the next good chunk of years on the right side defensively. How can you not deal at least one of Casey or Nemitz? I just don't see a world where that's possible. And those are both very valuable trade assets. I mean, it came out that the big asset that Fitzgerald came second on, it was because he didn't want to move Simone Nemitz. So, like, he still has massive value if you look at what David Jiricek got.
Massive, though? I feel like they've just, from last season, I honestly, back to the Brady Tkachuk thing, I was like, with the number 10 overall pick, Mercer and Nemitz, like, you might almost be there. That's kind of my feeling. Like, you might have to throw another first or something else. But I really thought last summer there was a path to landing them without sacrificing Brad or something. Now I'm like, him starting in the AHL and then him going in and out of the lineup. Now I feel like they maybe not plummeted his value, but I feel like it's a small fraction of what it was just a year ago.
I don't think, from everything I've heard and seen, I don't think it's a small fraction. I think it's definitely less, but not as less of, as people are making it out to be. And if you just look at, even now at some of my mentions on Twitter, like Habs fans especially are all over it, and plenty of teams from other fan bases as well. Like, we'll take Nemitz, and like, he's still viewed as that elite trade chip, and maybe it's not what it was last year, but I would say it's still roughly 85% of that.
Would anyone be acting this way if he was drafted 26th overall?
No.
No, certainly not. But he performed well enough and prior to the draft to earn that type of pedigree. I mean, this is a guy who actually played against nicohischier in the World Championships when he had just turned 16 and was holding his own against NHL players. And we even saw it last season. I know it's been a disaster this season, but for a very young kid coming into the league, Nemitz was pretty solid last season. And he's never going to be that high scoring type of guy. He's always been more of a two-way guy, but he certainly held his own. And this season has just been a complete disaster.
Sam?
I'm not a big fan of Nemitz at all. The kid doesn't pay attention. He doesn't listen to his coaches, and he's off to a rocky start with me. It's not that he can't change his, career around, but, I'm not saying he's a bad player or whatever. I just don't think he's a right fit for the New Jersey Devils.
I'll tell you guys a funny story. So I had a source at the AHL All-Star game, and Nemitz was in it. And the source, he's a good friend of mine. He told me that Nemitz was not happy with where he was at. And I was like, is he not happy with the Devils or being in the AHL? He's like, Nemitz is not happy in the AHL. You could tell he does not want to be here. And I'm just like, okay, but this is the situation. Devils have a lot of people in front of them. I was like, okay, Nemitz, you're being given a chance to show that you still belong in the NHL. So you better perform really well. Otherwise, your attitude is going to come back to bite you. Unfortunately, it's come back to bite him. I still think he has a lot of upside, and I think he has a lot of potential. The problem is just where he was drafted. No one told him to be the second overall pick. That's just how it is. But I think Nemitz at this point is nothing more than a trade pawn because I see more potential in Seamus Casey.
Daniel, what do you got on Casey versus Nemitz?
I mean, look, I said this the other night. I think neither of them are anywhere close to, well, it's hard with Nemitz because he showed it last season, so you don't know if it's just a confidence thing. But bottom line is, if Seamus Casey isn't shooting almost 50% and goalies don't have a .983 save percentage when he's on the ice, the narrative is completely different with him. Not saying that he's been bad per se, but if you look at just the surface numbers, chances allowed versus chances generated when he's on the ice, he's actually been worse than Nemitz. And like I said, Devils goalies having a .983 save percentage, and Casey scored on 4 of his 9 shots at the NHL level. I mean, this is a guy who was shooting 6% in Utica. So it's just nowhere near sustainable, and I have gotten consistent flack for that. And Seamus Casey's so much better. Of course, a fan base is going to think one player is so much better when they've scored the goals. But if you're just looking at all the numbers, I mean, he's not even averaging a shot per game. I think he's played 10 games and has 9 shots on goal. So it's not like he's been this complete world changer when he's been on the ice. He's just ran to a bit of shooting luck, and he has a good shot, something that many Devils don't have. So that's not to rag on him, but at the same time, he's small. His defensive game certainly needs a lot of work, and I think that's why he's in the AHL right now, where he can work on that, and Nemitz is sitting in the press box at the NHL level.
Yeah, I like Casey. I've said for probably months now that if it was up to me, I would keep him over Nemitz, even if Nemitz might be the better overall defenseman down the line, is just because I do think in the post Dougie Hamilton era, on defense, other than Luke, I don't think there's any other guy that we have that will bring that kind of offensive upside that Casey could. Now, he was protected, to your point. Keefe kind of protected him and kept him from a lot of scenarios, and as a result, didn't play a ton of minutes. But I do think as he develops with his skating vision, that obvious crazy shot that he has, that he will be, if he's still in the organization, one of the, quote unquote, offensive defensemen for the Devils into the future, where I don't think we really have any other guys like that or with that upside at the moment, other than Luke, when Dougie's eventually gone, which, at some point will happen. All right, we'll do closing comments and where to find you all. We've been on here forever. Appreciate everybody's time. We'll start with you, Sam. I know you're hungry. Didn't get to eat all day. Give me your closing thoughts on anything you want to say and where everyone could find you.
Well, first and foremost, it was really nice chatting with you guys tonight. You guys brought your own point of view, and it's got me thinking. My closing thoughts are, I wouldn't give up on this Devils team. I know we're talking about them making the playoffs and maybe they'll make to the third round, but I think they can build on this. I trust. I'm putting my trust in Sheldon Keefe. That's what I'll say.
I like it. Trey?
My closing thoughts are, look, this season didn't go as planned. It started off really good, then it went downhill really quick. But the Devils are still a playoff team. A lot of teams have it worse than them. So my thing is, let's not be ungrateful. It's okay to be frustrated, but let's not be over dramatic as well. Like, the Devils are going to be fine. Come next season, I think they're going to be fine. They just need to go back to the drawing board. My goal for Devils coming into the season, playoffs or bust.
Next season, you're saying that?
No, this season. Coming into this season. Coming into this season.
Playoffs
coming into this season. I said this season, playoffs or bust.
Absolutely.
They didn't make the playoffs last year. If they make it to the playoffs and if they make it past the first round, whatever the case might be, that's just gravy on top. That's my thing. So that's my thing. I appreciate you guys. I know we're all busy with our own things, so we don't get to do this too often. But for anyone who thought like we all have beef with one another, it's not true at all. We all get along. I'm a big fan of everyone's work here. Just saying. So you can find my show at Locked On Devils on Twitter, and also it's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. And also check out some of my articles at Pucks and Pitchforks, which is fan-sided.
Awesome. Daniel?
Well, I know Sam mentioned Sheldon Keefe, and I will quickly add that Sheldon Keefe, I still believe, is the right guy for this team. If you look at how he's overhauled their defense, and with better players in Toronto, he got the offensive numbers. So it's not a question of system or anything. It's just the roster. Like, a coach is only as good as their players at the end of the day. And I think Keefe has been very insightful, much more so than at least Lindy Ruff. Travis Green was pretty insightful, but Keefe is always willing to explain himself, explain what he's doing. So that's something as media that's very appreciated. Aside from that, I mean, I think playoffs or bust is a given. That's the bare minimum, because playoffs or bust is essentially avoid a historic collapse or bust, because that's where we're at right now. Also want to say, I am really hoping that Mrs. Fields gets her first win very soon. And
explain to the people that might not know the backstory on that.
So the Devils have their dessert race that they do during a TV timeout at the games on the Jumbotron. And it's three characters racing each other. It's Mrs. Fields, the cookie. Is it still Rita's or no? It's Welch's Farms, which I guess is like ice cream, Italian ice, something like that. And then Annie Ann's, which is the pretzel. And it's just been this running gag that every single time Mrs. Fields loses, and I think we're up to like something like 27, 28, maybe even 30 losses now for Mrs. Fields. And like, it's gone progressively worse each game. Like, the fans just like booing, fans bring signs saying #free the cookie. Like, it's pretty funny, and it like Twitter loves it. I've been milking it. I've been milking the crap out of it, but like hot milk cookie hot. But yeah, it's pretty funny, but I think at the same time, it's like, all right, like every time we go to a game, it's like, is this the game Mrs. Fields is going to do it? And at this point, it's like, all right, like let's give Mrs. Fields a moment now. I think especially with crunch time coming, big game against the Blue Jackets tomorrow night would be the perfect time to give Mrs. Fields her first win, because now I sense some people, at least from what I've seen from my mentions, like the joke's not funny anymore. And I can't comment on that. It's not that deep to me at the end of the day. I know I tweeted something like that, but it was half a joke. But yeah, that would be pretty funny if Mrs. Fields gets her first W. And lastly, of course, I forget what I was going to say. Oh yeah, the Devils have to beat the Blue Jackets. I mean, that just for they got that win in Philly. It's like, how many times have we seen win-loss, 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 win-loss? The Devils just need to go out there, just play great Devils hockey, stifle them, finish their chances. I'm sure Markstrom will start most likely, and he'll be solid in net. And that would just be a huge win in every sense, just because of where the standings are at and post-trade deadline, how everyone felt. Just a massive contest against the Blue Jackets. I think, I don't want to call it a must win, because they could certainly still make the playoffs if they lose, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close to feeling like a must win.
Do we ever see McDermott again?
That's a great question, actually.
Ace, I know. I'm sorry, Daniel. Ace, I know you love Curtis McDermott. The reason why they have a winning record when he's out there is not because of him. That's just pure coincidental.
Well, I also said to my point of I think, do respond from the fights, but you also get the built-in extra shifts for some of the top 6 guys as well, which obviously they're not going to complain about that. You think no causation? None at all. I don't think Daniel thinks so either. And we see Olivier. They have Olivier. So listen, we saw it with Delorier. He was running around in that Flyers game.
I mean,
no answer.
It could happen, but at the end of the day, like, the victory is what matters, whether that's with McDermott or without. I mean, the Devils just need to play a good brand of hockey and not keep falling into the win-loss repeated times 1,000. It's just such a crucial game for them.
My final thoughts, playoffs are bust for sure. I mean, not making the playoffs, given where they were only a couple months ago, in conjunction with, I'm sorry, I'm never going to change my viewpoint on this, with I'm going to call it somewhere between underwhelming and tragic deadline. I think the truth is somewhere in between the two. In conjunction with that, and waiting till the deadline to address the issues that were evident for months, missing the playoffs with that lead, I think, would be absolutely catastrophic. And in my opinion, immediate termination for Fitzgerald would be warranted. I don't think that'll happen, but missing the playoffs 2 years in a row, given how it happened both seasons, and coming off of a franchise record-setting season, I don't think any, respectable franchise in sports, if you set a franchise record for a regular season, win a playoff round, and then go miss with the key pieces all being there. Granted, there was a little changeover with other things, but with the main players still being in place from that season, I think would be definitely warrants termination. I'm just curious, before everyone leaves, what your thoughts on that are.
Fitzy's not going anywhere. Just that.
No, I don't think he is either. But if they missed, would you say it's warranted to say you've had your chance here?
I think you can have the discussion, but I don't think you're going to get very far in the discussion. That's just my quick thoughts on it.
Yeah, I don't think that's, I mean, obviously it's not happening, but I wouldn't say it's warranted just because of the circumstances. If you look at last season, goaltending and just horrendous injuries. I mean, they were without Dougie basically the entire season. Jack goes down
75% of the season, to be exact.
And then this season, look, I'm not saying Fitzgerald has hit the nail on the head with everything, but you look at so many members of the bottom 6, and well, just the forward group in general, so many players have taken a step backwards. I mean, just from last season, I think Meier, Palat, Mercer, Halla, Lazar, I'm definitely missing a couple just off the top of my head, have all significantly I'm saying words that don't even make sense, taken a downtrend since then. And look, like Tom Fitzgerald didn't know that all these players were going to produce less than they did last season all at the same time. I mean, I feel like you have to give him a little bit of credit for that. Like, again, we could talk about the bottom six until we're blue in the face, but no one saw it being that much of a disaster. I mean, he had the quote in July, "We were never worried about scoring with this team." And now obviously that looks like a horrendous quote, but no one was calling him out at the time because it seemed like they had the scoring and the numbers from last season backed that up. So,
but when did you write that article about how it fell off a cliff? You said you wrote it back in
that was in December. Yeah. And
at some point, if you put the article out, right, you recognized it. I think everyone did. So at what point can you not gloss over that? Like, listen, to your point, maybe you never saw these guys dipping the way it did, but then it happened, and then nothing happened till the deadline day, and then more nothing happened. That's just kind of my frustration because, great. It's not your fault they fell off a cliff, but it's your fault that you did nothing for it for months leading up to a crucial playoff run.
I mean, I don't disagree with that necessarily, but I think to me, it still seems like there's, you could say, a concept of a plan. This offseason is going to be what's really telling. If he doesn't dramatically improve the team this offseason, I think then you could start talking about whether it's warranted or not. But he clearly he preserved his assets. He felt that he didn't have to go all in, or at least came in second if he tried. So now he has to back it up in the offseason. And come October, we'll see what kind of roster the Devils had, and then we can have that discussion if necessary.
Sam?
If Fitzgerald was, say if the Devils collapsed, they didn't make the playoffs. If he was on an expiring contract, he would be renewed. I don't think the Devils would ever fire him. They would just let his contract run out. They don't want to pay somebody twice.
And we'll leave it at that, fellas. Appreciate your time. This was long overdue. Wanted to do it like mid-season, but glad we finally got to do it. 17 games left to see the fate of whether this team will stumble into the playoffs or, as Daniel put it, an epic collapse. We will know in about 5 weeks or so. I'm hoping for the best, and it starts tomorrow with a massive, massive division win over the Blue Jackets. I appreciate your guys' time. Hopefully we'll do this again in the future. Thank you all for you guys watching. I'm going to stay on here for another couple minutes after I let these guys go. You could find all of their stuff in the description, and you guys checked it out too. If there's anything else you want me to add in there, just message me and I'll put it in there. I put whatever was on your Twitter, I think. But awesome, guys. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. We'll do this again, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Thanks.
You're going to disappear one at a time. All right, and there you have it. A couple of you or a bunch of you have been talking about getting some of these guys on over the past however long. Made it happen. Send a couple messages out and made it happen. Great talking to those guys entrenched in the Devils online world as well. And, tomorrow is a massive game for your New Jersey Devil. Oh, my bad. Oh, man, I'm so sorry. Daniel, I apologize. I had a different screen up with all the people on, so I didn't see this. But thank you for the super chat. Need more of these split broadcasts? Please link the other broadcasters if you haven't already. They are all in the description. I might be adding more stuff because a lot of them have multiple kind of things going on. So I will add, let me just see here. I don't know how to do this. But thank you for that, Daniel. And then, Joe, pizza money for you all. You're each allowed 2 slices. Thank you for the super. Let me see here now. I'll stay on here for a couple minutes. Very active chat here. I'm just trying to figure out how to do something here. We need a big win tomorrow, guys. I'm a little exhausted. That was the first time I had multiple people on, and there's a lot of shit kind of going on behind the scenes. I thought it went off pretty well. But, yeah, let me know what you guys thought about that. Hopefully do something like that again. But, yeah, that was fun. That was fun. Obviously, I'm the negative one of the group. I mean, but I think you guys knew that going into it. I don't think there was any surprises there that was going to be the case. But listen, guys, I'm an old man. I grew up in the Lou Lamoriello era, and I want to see greatness. I saw greatness, and I'd like to see it again before I croak. Now, whether that happens or not remains to be seen. But we'll see. Big game tomorrow, 17 games left. I am going to be delusionally optimistic and hope this team just kind of finds a new identity as a, 2-1 kind of ugly, grind them out game and find a way to get hot at the right time going into the playoffs. It will be interesting. 5 weeks left in the regular season. Let me get my thing here. Ryan says those dudes were okay with punting the season, it seems. I don't think so. I just think people, aren't as animated as me, for better or for worse, right? Like, they're more even keeled. I'm a little bit of a wacko sometimes. I'm very passionate. So I don't think they're okay with punting. I mean, pretty much everyone agreed playoffs are bust. And they all kind of were on board with varying degrees of the underwhelming deadline. I don't think they were as offended as I was by it, but I think everyone was pretty much on board that they were expecting more. John, that was great, Ace. Great to get the NJD podcasters that I watch as well. John Sumner, I've wanted to hear the different opinions. Please do that again. Ryan, no, they're not Fitz's children. Yo, Holmes, I love Trey. I hate the advanced BS. Dino, it went fine. One New York Ranger fan weirdo came early and was spamming chat. I blocked a couple people. There was like some crazy things of mangoes or something. Again, I'm trying to navigate all this shit behind the scenes. So as a one-man kind of army here, there was a lot going on for me, but I saw, and it was multiple screen names. I blocked one of them, and then like instantaneously there was another one posting, I think it was mangoes. It was like mangoes. I'm like, what the hell is mangoes? And then, yeah, I blocked it. Yeah, and I don't know, that was weird. But let me see. Just trying to scan here. Lots of stuff. Sorry, I couldn't, with the way the screens are set up, I wanted to go to some comments and stuff, but multiple people is a whole different ball game in terms of, so unfortunately didn't get to any comments, but maybe in a future one, I'll figure out how to, incorporate comments. I had planned on doing it, but yeah, hit the like. Would appreciate that. Hit the like. Fitz is awful. You could rewatch it. You didn't miss Trey. He's still there. You just didn't get him live. You just got to do the rewind feature. Husky, love this. Well done. Val, nice job, Ace. Way to go. Nicole, thanks, Ace. Good job. What's going on, Maria? That was excellent. Thank you. I certainly hope we're winning tomorrow. It's a massive, biggest regular season game, I would say, in years. I'm trying to think the last time there was a regular season game with this level of significance. And I can't think of one offhand. It's been quite some time. Nicole, agree. The passion is appreciated. I appreciate your appreciation. I don't know what the mangoes were. Collect records. Ace, you do a great job. We have to get you a moderator. The moderator is in like someone talking or just like someone doing the comments. I don't know what that means per se. We should do this often. It's not that easy to coordinate multiple people's schedules. It's actually way harder than you would ever imagine. But yeah, glad it worked out. It was a good time. Hopefully get those guys back on. Maybe, whenever. John, when you were talking about Brock Besser, I'd like him too. But if we don't get him, I would like Jamie McCann. I like McCann as well. He was a guy that I thought we were going to have a chance at get at the deadline, but it didn't happen. And here we are. I think there's going to be some opportunity for a lot of guys, whether they're free agents or trades. Big summer coming up. But first, we got to get through this season, hopefully get to the playoffs, hopefully go on a little run. And we'll see. But McCann's definitely a guy I'm interested in. Meadowlander, excellent. Can you do this again just before the playoffs? I will certainly try. Again, very hard to coordinate multiple people's schedules, but I do enjoy, talking to other people that are, in the Devils, entrenched in the Devils online kind of world. Cape Dollar final, Ottawa 2, Detroit 1. Wow. Yeah, I think Ottawa's going to make it, man. Brady Tkachuk is going to will them to the wait, when was that from? Ottawa, Detroit. Oh, yeah, just one final. Okay, my screen's. Wow. Yeah, big one tomorrow. Oh, man, Ottawa's got the back-to-back, too, playing Philly. A lot of scoreboard watching down the stretch here. There's going to be a lot of scoreboard watching. Yeah, and Zetterlund went to Ottawa. That's the one for me that, a second rounder and, a very low-level prospect. Even if we took in Zetterlund as a rental and didn't re-sign him, I would have done that. What the hell? Why not? Clearly, the fan base would have been much more excited by Zetterlund than what we ended up doing. But it is what it is. The team we have is here. I'll be rooting for them. Hopefully, they could go on a run. They should preemptively have another power outage at the Rocks so the Jackets don't score 7 again like they did at the Garden. Man. All right, guys, that's it. That's it. I don't know if I'm going to do a pregame tomorrow, but I'll definitely be back after the game. Devils hosting the Blue Jackets. And my God, what a monster game. The Blue Jackets trail the Devils for third in the Metro by 4 points with 2 games in hand. So essentially, if they won those 2 games in hand, they're tied with the Devils for points. A massive opportunity for the Devils to give them a little jab to the face on their playoff hopes tomorrow. And they better come out flying. I do not want to see any sleepwalking first periods, really for the rest of the season. But especially in tomorrow night's game, you are playing the team that is right on your heels. You have a 4-point lead for that third spot in the Metro. 2 games in hand. We play them tomorrow and one more time down the stretch of the season. Absolutely. Again, you know how I feel about must win. It is not a must win, but you really got to win. Nothing is a must win unless it's a must win. But it's you really got to win. And we're going to see what this team is made of. Tomorrow is a pre-playoff game. I expect warfare. Hopefully we see some heavier, edgier, more violent. The boys come out. They start hitting, start flying. And I'll be back. If I don't do the pregame, I'll definitely obviously be back for the post game. Big win. The Devils need it. Special thank you to my guests again, Daniel Amoia of the Hockey Writers, Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils, and Sam Wu of the Let's Go Devils podcast. Links to all their stuff in the description. Check them out. And that's it, guys. I'm exhausted. That was kind of tiring. I was trying to do multiple things at once, and sometimes online multitasking is a lot. My brain is fried. I need a dirty devil. But that's it. Thank you all for watching. I love you all. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. Until next time, friends, let's go